topic that we went through a couple of weeks ago was intelligent teaming, and it was about virtually, and I'll do a refresh on this in a second, but basically how you, when it comes to teaming, what are the sorts of partners that might be best for you and what do you bring to that type of relationship? So we're going to dig into that to really get more deeper, to talk about nuances and like ID combinations in this call. But I thought it might be good to start with our peak performance indicator check-in, PPI check-in with all of you. And just in case there's anything going on that anyone's having a particularly great run and they're shining, or maybe they're not as on their game and they like to at least share that. If not, get some help from the group on. So I think everyone here knows of the peak performance indicator model, so I won't go through it again, but just very quickly on a scale of 0 to 10, if 10 is you being really in stride, true to yourself and feeling that you're able to be that, and a 1 out of 10 is at the other end of that scale, hard to get motivated, hard to get out of bed, doing things begrudgingly because it's just not your way, what would be your number? And you might just put that in the chat screen. You can see over on the right, if you click on the chat button, you'll see we've got, like Susan is a 9, Greg's a 9, Grant, see there's a lot of high scores there. Very high, which is not uncommon for this group, actually. Another good score for you, Grant. Is that because you just come back from work, from a holiday?
Pretty much. Yeah, it was really nice to reconnect with my mother after 2.5 years of COVID.
That's incredible.
My brother was 4 years since I've seen him in person. So it was like recharging the batteries.
And was it all of you that came back over? No,
long story, but our visas had expired and the kids can't travel without doing a full-blown interview, and it would have put them at risk of coming back to school late. So I just went by myself just so I could get mine done.
That worked really well, didn't it?
Certainly did. Certainly did. It was great. It was really nice. It just, massive impact mentally. So it was
good on you. Good on you. Okay, so does anyone, these are all really high scores, as you know, an 8 and above is where you want to be. Does anyone have anything they wanted to share about their score and maybe either what they've done to get there or anything at all that you might want to just share with the group?
I'll share, Paul, if I can. I just did a big strategy day with one of my clients yesterday, and I just love it, and just love the responses and the interaction. And and when I get feedback back saying it was a really great day and there was really great outcomes, it's just feeds the soul and all those things that I love doing. So yeah.
Good on you. Good on you. Yeah, there's nothing quite. Someone said to me years ago, there's no amount of depression that a good sale doesn't clear up. But I'd say for an improviser, there's no amount of depression or, when you get positive interaction and that positive energy around you, it's almost impossible to not be back on your game again. Well done, Joe. Judy, were you going to share something?
Yes. I am right now feeling the effects of my complete drive, and I'll emphasize the drive, and not being able to get into harmony because of that. And that's what's taking me to an 8.5 from a 10 that I've been at.
Yeah. Can you see what's missing for you to be able to get that sort of corrected and get back to where you were?
It mostly has to do with my apartment, because when I moved here, I moved from 2,100 square feet to 700, and I've got a lot of things that I need to sort, and it's not happening fast enough, and there's not enough places to put things. And so I continually need to think of, where am I going to put things or give them away, or there's just a lot of decisions that need to be made, and they're slowing me down. And I like to get things to complete. and then I feel good. Everything is in harmony, and that's not working right now. I was trying to explain to somebody what this, because it's been so helpful to me to understand how driven I am to complete. And I was trying to explain that. And I said, I can't think of an analogy that would help you understand it. Because I think there's a lot of people that don't have this drive, that don't understand. Well, just just do this or just do that. And so I just keep learning and thinking and observing and all that kind of thing.
Well, firstly, I think the most important thing, Judy, is that you understand it. Like you've at least now got the grasp on, wow, this is really intense for me, and that at least now you can recognize that when other people even try to understand, that they don't, that there's still a gap between what your truth to be and where others are at. Rather than you feeling like anything was wrong with you, you now just see it as you're different to their definition. I think that's really powerful. That's the first thing that stands out to me when I hear you talk, that you're the one that's got that grasp.
Yeah, and I do understand it.
So you raise, for the sake of the learning, given this is a masterclass, for the sake of the learning, I just want to dig in for a second here on the example that you gave. So what I'm hearing you say is, as a 70 incomplete that likes all her ducks in a row and all of that harmony, you've moved from 2,100 square feet to 700 square feet, but you've still got too much stuff for 700 square feet. It'd be like someone who's going to be going on a trip and they packed everything in the trunk of their car, and now they've decided to go on an aeroplane, so they've now got to fit it all in a suitcase, but they've got the same amount of stuff to take, and you can only take one suitcase. So you're going through basically, what am I going to throw out as opposed to, keep. And that's a metaphor for life. Like, you could argue that same challenge is what pulls all completers out of shape, is when they're trying to fit life or elements of life into a square, like an area that's less than what they've got available. Could be you've got too many things on your plate for one weekend. You've got, too many friends to try and get around and invite or to visit or to invite to a party, and you're trying to look at who you get rid of. Which you don't want anyone to be gotten rid of or anything to be. You want inclusion is the language of a harmonious completer, not exclusion. Let alone discarding, because then you won't have any connection with it forevermore. So although it might not sound like that big it's just about how you reorganize everything at home. It's actually a huge issue, and a huge issue for someone who's a 70 incomplete. But what came up for me when I heard you talk was contemplation is always the harder part for a completer than the execution. Like, the thinking about it is where all the worry and the stress comes from. Once you actually do it, there's less stress. And what often helps people in your position is when there are rules. When there are rules, and it could be as simple as you're going to go and clean out your wardrobe or your closet, and if you go in there going, all right, I need to sort through what I'm going to keep and what I'm not going to keep, 5-6 hours later, you've got the same amount of clothes as what you had before, because you just can't bring yourself to a decision. But if you had rules, like anything that I haven't worn for 2 years, I'm throwing out, right? You are a stickler for rules and complying with rules. And so if you had some rules that you predetermined for how you then go about decluttering, I wonder whether that would help you get into your 700 square feet. And although there'd be things that would leave you, you discard, the fact that you get it done, the fact that you then get organized and you did it according to your rules, I would imagine it would restore that harmony really quickly for you.
I will take that into my heart.
And what you might need, just to build on that, is someone to collaborate with to help brainstorm the rules. Being your whole ID, if you had someone to talk through to say, well, what might be some rules? It wouldn't probably matter what ID they were, just the fact that they're not emotionally attached to your stuff. They can be more objective about it. And I don't know whether there's anyone on this call that, just for the sake of your own growth, let alone helping Judy, you might like to volunteer to just collaborate with Judy to go through establishing some rules. And then Judy, you could be accountable to next time we come together, say, yeah, I met with, X person. We came up with some rules, I apply them, and I've now got everything done, and I'm back in harmony. I don't know if there's someone who would like to do that with you on this call, just for their own experience of playing this exercise out. Is there anybody?
I'd love to, Judy.
You'd like to do that with me?
Yeah, love to. There's a book called by Marie Kondo, and she helps you.
I know it. I've watched
Yeah.
the movie. I've read the book. I know it.
Yeah. And she just says, does it spark joy? If it doesn't, then let it go. Yeah. So, but no, I'd be happy to connect with you. Yeah.
Yeah, and we've talked before, and so we can set that up.
Okay, sounds good. All right.
What would be interesting for the rest of us, Judy, is when you go through that exercise to learn what happens for you as a result of doing that, and to share that from your heart, back with the team. I think that there are nuances about that. What happens for you, both from a harmony point of view, but other things as well, because typically, being a completer, when one little piece of your jigsaw puzzle isn't quite right, there's an effect on other parts of the jigsaw puzzle, and you may not even know what they are until you get to the other side of it. But sharing that could be really beneficial for all of us. And kudos to you, Susan, for volunteering. I'm sure you will.
That was Susan. That was Susan. I'm sorry. I thought it was Leonie that was speaking. I'm sorry. Yes, Susan. Okay.
All right.
Great. Okay.
Okay.
You might get more help than you bargained, but they might be on a plane over. They might do the cleaning up for you, Judy.
Well, that would be exciting.
And maybe two perspectives might be good too, if
That's
Leonie
right.
wants to volunteer. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you get a very different perspective given the difference in IDs.
We've always found that my wife is completed. Other people use her to clean up their stuff because she's more ruthless than they would be. And what I'm just wondering, Judy, does it work for you if someone said, rather than what am I leaving out, if you said to yourself, what is allowed to come, and you had to pass the grade to get included, rather than, because you made some comment about I can't do it all, or I can't keep it all. Would it change anything for you if you were thinking what's allowed to come, or what makes the grade, rather than what am I leaving? Or is that not a distinction big enough?
I don't know right offhand, Greg.
Okay. I'm just trying to switch the paradigm that your frustration is trying to do it all. I'm saying redefine all. Anyway, that's it.
Okay. I don't know the answer to that right offhand.
I think my feeling on it is inclusion will always make you feel better, Judy. Greg's point's right, in as much as if there are whatever rules you come up with and you follow those rules and what's allowed, I think that will work for you. The other is to think about not discarding, but how are you helping? Like when people are throwing clothes out, for example, as they think, if what's in their head is I'm throwing out these clothes, there's a sense of loss. But if you think of yourself as giving these clothes to someone else to help clothe those people that, like, if you've got a jacket that you're not wearing and you feel like you're throwing it out, you feel like you're losing the jacket. But if you felt you were helping keep someone else warm with that jacket, you would be probably one of the first people to give that jacket to them. So often just a different perspective about you're just redeploying the use as opposed to trying to finish something off, and discard it. That might help you have a more healthy approach to it. All right, let's see what happens over the course of the next few weeks for you. Does anyone else have anything they want to share of this call? So I would just like to add this perspective. I was listening to a podcast this morning, a guy called Sinek that I know many of you might know. I think even on this call, this has been mentioned previously, but he has a talk out at the moment that you can easily see on YouTube on the infinity game. And so much of what he's sharing on that particular speech is aligned to everything that we talk about here, being true to yourself, investing in people, being authentic, being vulnerable, all of those principles. It's very aligned to what we're about. But he was speaking this morning, or someone asked a question about, instead of thinking of head counts, you think of heart counts, so instead of saying you might have 1,000 people working for you, but if you thought of it as, if you did a heart count, like how many people are there with their hearts, where they're all in, that might be a different number. I know someone recently, I'm trying to think, I think I know the company, I won't mention them, but they did an engagement pulse across their company, and they said, we had really good engagement scores, but if we actually measured how many people have got their heart in the game, we'd get a different score. And I thought this concept of heart count versus head count was just a really interesting perspective. And when I thought about the PPI check-in that we do, it's not entirely about your heart, but I did think to myself, it'd be hard for someone to have their heart in the game if they had a low score. Or on the other hand, if they had their heart in the game and had a low score, that would be an enormous stress because you'd feel incredibly constrained. But I'm not sure how we might measure that heart score piece, but I thought it was a really relevant point. And for those of you in leadership positions with your own teams, or for those of you influencing some of those leaders, I thought it would be a really great conversation, or either thought to reflect on for your own team, and just even have that conversation, or as a coach to people like that, to bring that in. So that distinction between head count and heart count, because that is also what we're all about. I mean, so much of our work is all about getting people's hearts in the game and keeping them in the game so they're always at their best. So for those of you who have not listened to that talk, I just wanted to introduce that to you today. It was a really simple concept, heart count with head count, and how you might do, what you might do to shift the heart count score.
What was the last name, Simon? What?
Sinek, S-I-N-E-K, Sinek. All right. So let me show the slides from last week, and I'll just reintroduce that discussion for you. So we were talking about, can you see my screen okay?
Not yet, no.
Something's gone wrong. 1 second. Maybe I didn't share it properly. Yeah, there you go. Now it should come up. So what's the team makeup that's right for you? And there were a couple of slides that I had that we didn't dig into too much, but I'll show you in terms of, when we're looking at having a partner, whether that's a life partner, a business partner, a partner on a particular initiative, there are certain people that we seem to be instinctively attracted to. And yet, even though we can be attracted to them, that doesn't mean that it's perfection. There can still be challenges that come up from our own vulnerabilities, or just from the differences that occur between your way and their way. And this was just a matrix that I'd started to put together for us to dig into. I actually had 3 of them for this discussion. I'll show you them all in a second. And these are just instinct by instinct. So what are the sort of people you're attracted to? But we didn't talk last time about combinations of drives, and how if you've got a certain combination, have you found that you're invariably attracted to a certain type of person. So I'll give you an example what I mean by combinations. It could be as simple as you might say, yes, I've come to learn that for me, I'm attracted to entrepreneurial people. I thought I wanted to be an entrepreneur, but I'm not an entrepreneur. I don't want to be an entrepreneur, but I want to be in an entrepreneurial environment, or with an entrepreneurial team where the other person takes the lead and I sort of sweep up, because I find myself really good at and fulfilled by, the execution or the following through and the sweeping up of what that other person might instigate. That's one example of, putting the whole of your ID to work, and just your own experience of what you found yourself attracted to and where that works. And equally, you might find that there are certain environments that you're not attracted to, or certain people and teams that don't work for you. And I thought, you know, given that this is our masterclass group, it would be really valuable to just hear from you guys to help everyone else, even those who aren't here today but are listening to this recording. What have you found that, and maybe you can explain it through your ID now, but are there particular people or teams or environments that you find yourself attracted to, or I won't say repulsed from, but like repelled from, you know, in terms of you're driven away from other types of people and teams? Has anyone got any reaction to that?
I am drawn to people who are inclusive. That's one of the reasons I really value this group, because people are very inclusive and caring and warm and interested and that kind of thing. So,
well, I think we can all say with your ID, Judy, as a strong completer, given what we're just talking about, how that resonates, right? Thank you for describing it that way. That's a really great point. And ironically, when you think about, you know, how many people would value being included, like how many completers would probably say a similar thing, and yet so many business leaders are avoid complete. They're all banging on these days about diversity and inclusion, and yet I don't know how much progress they're making about it, because there's plenty of people that still don't feel included for whatever reasons. But it's not natural. It's not an instinctively natural thing for so many business leaders to be inclusive, and yet people like you are drawn to that.
Just excuse my no video here, but I am a very high verify. I'm an 8, and I definitely fully resonate with everything in my little bucket there. I'm always drawn to solving problems, and in terms of your question around types of people or types of groups, definitely groups and people that are maybe struggling with something, or I fully I really like the injustices and inequalities. If there's a cause around that, I'm all in on that. So yeah, fully agree with everything on this slide in that bucket for sure.
Thank you for sharing that, Gina. Are there times when you question yourself and think, why am I always drawn to the problems, or why is it me that seems to have these things landing on my plate, where it's, you know?
Yes and no. So I love a good challenge, and it really energizes me. But probably the only point in time when that does cross my mind is maybe when I'm halfway through it, or it's feeling a little hard and you're like, goodness, why aren't I getting it? And that's probably the impatience coming out around that, that never good enough and excellence. So there's a tension there around wanting to help people maybe a little bit stuck, etc. And then sometimes when, you're dealing with people who aren't maybe striving for that same level of excellence, or, don't have the same level of experience, or maybe, are just taking a little bit of time to get it, maybe that's when the impatience kind of comes in, and that's when the questions around, oh goodness, why am I doing this? Right. But ultimately you get a great result, and I sort of put my consulting hat on and I help them through it. So yeah, right. But no, it's fantastic.
Great. Thanks for sharing that, Gina. Now, Judy, you raised this topic there a couple of weeks back, on partnering up with people from a business point of view. What have you learned for yourself? That question was coming from you. I don't know whether it was about you or something you experienced, or whether it was someone that you were working with. But I'm curious as to what your experience, what was behind your question, and what you want to share with the team on that.
Well, recently, I was about to get into a business situation with a gentleman who I've known for a long time, and we've been good friends. And then when he's also an attorney, and he sent me an agreement of how we were going to work together. And when I saw this disagreement, I said, I cannot
I work with it.
something like this.
Yeah.
And and then he disappeared. He just totally disappeared. And I thought to myself, I need to be able to make better decisions before I get to the point of even having somebody write up an agreement about whether I want to work with that person.
Well, maybe that was part of the process. Maybe the fact that you were so vigilant and aware of your needs, the fact that even when that happened as a step along the journey and you knew to call it, instead of the old you might have just continued on that journey because you wanted to complete it, you know, if that was the plan. But this time you actually were aware enough to sort of go, oh, that's a red flag for me. That won't work for me. And you could call it, you know. I think that's really powerful.
Well, I agree. I did have the additional awareness, but I wouldn't have gone ahead. The way he wrote up this contract or agreement, I wouldn't have gone ahead. Even the old me wouldn't have gone ahead.
Okay.
But
Okay.
it just really alerted me, and now I am much more alert before I'm making a decision to work with somebody, and I'm even considering maybe asking them to do their ID.
Yeah.
Before I work with them.
Well, you can see the difference it makes even on this group. Like I just noticed before when Gina was talking and she didn't have her ID, Joe said, hey, can put your ID in there? Because when you know where people are coming from, you hear them, don't you? I mean, all of us experience this now. You actually listen with a different set of ears because you know what they mean more precisely, and you can react differently than if they're coming from a totally different direction, you know. So
apologies for that.
I would really encourage that.
8333, just so everyone knows.
That's right. Thank you, Gina. All right. Does anyone else have an experience where they can see the sorts of situations that they are attracted to and that work well for them from a teaming, that, you know, the type of people and situations that attract you or that you stay away from?
Well, I'd be really interested in knowing about, you know, I'm a Use Authenticate, and yes, I have been for many years, I suppose, attracted to help people and do things like that. But interesting, avoid Authenticate, you've got superficial to bring depth. I find it really hard to have superficial conversations. I can't talk about TV shows and recipes and stuff that other people seem to find enjoyable and things. I really get quite impatient with simple and super, what I call or what I feel are superficial conversations, and sometimes I possibly go too deep for some people, but then I own it and say, look, I've got over passionate or over this or over that or whatever. But I'd be really interested to know, and I probably, you know, just seeing that bringing depth to the avoid Authenticate, I'm really interested to know, you know, where that need for depth is from me, because it doesn't really it's not really showing up there.
Is it depth or is it just truth?
Well, that's a good question. It feels like I call it depth. It's definitely truth. It's sort of, yeah, maybe it is truth. I'll need to reflect on that one. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, like if I talk for myself as a one in Authenticate, if I'm having a conversation with people, it is normally around, you know, superficial topics to me don't interest, but to bring that to some level of meaning and depth is a real driver. And if people want to stay superficial, then I'm going to, you know, close down on that fairly quickly. If I went to a social environment and everyone's talking about, just simple examples, but for me would be everyone's talking about the football or a topic of sport that I don't really have that deep an understanding of any sport, to be honest. So, you know, I know enough to listen to what they're talking about, but I don't know. I'm not fanatical about any one sport, whether it was tennis or football or, you know, the Olympics or whatever, to be able to sort of recite the detail that some people get into. And to me, a lot of it would be superficial, but the minute they connect the sport to a purpose in life or how they, you know, use their learnings to go and do something, and there's more depth and meaning to it, now I get much more engaged, you know. if they weren't even talking truth and they were just talking metaphorically or theoretically about things, that's okay for me, as long as it leads to something of depth. You know, I would think for an authenticator, it first of all has to be truthful. It has to be a truth. If people aren't being authentic with you, that would be okay, as long as you could pull that out of them and get them to a place of authenticity, because you'd feel like you're really helping them. But if you weren't helping and you weren't going somewhere that was useful, that you could do anything with it, then I think that would be a waste of space and quickly disengage you.
Yeah, that resonates. Thank you.
Yes,
My
Paul.
experience, go on, sorry, go on. Doug.
Great, Paul. Yeah, on my side, you know, up, down, down, as you can see by the number, the situations really mean a lot. I really thrive off an exact opposite drive in terms of the collaborative side, because they fill in a lot of gaps that I don't have. When the implementation side starts happening, that's where things can get a bit fractious, because they're on another wavelength, and I thought we had a plan and they thought we had a plan, and the implementation's totally different. So that's what ID really alerted me to, was it's all very fine having a plan, but half the time the plan's totally different. And then when it comes,
can I play back what I'm hearing you say is you thrive on having people around you who are different to you when it's in the brainstorming stage, when you're problem solving, you're trying to get a lot of different perspectives and solutions. But is that right? But when it comes, you love that part. But when it comes to the execution, having that same amount of diversity can be really frustrating, because then you have a more set way, or that you want it done, or the different understandings of the plan just create more frustration than what you want to tolerate. Yeah,
that's where the crucial part is. I find the crucial additional is the completer. If you can get a completer involved after the brainstorm and after the plan to get a bunch of KPIs and a few rules out and agree those, then I find you can go much further, because the real rub comes in the sort of hard leadership side, you know, where there's a crisis or an opportunity or a risky situation. That's where the rules and the KPIs really come into play, because it can get you both onto the same page. Because the hard leadership side, when there's a crisis and decisions have to be made, somebody's got to own it, somebody's got to command a situation. And that's where you find the real conflict can arise. And that needs to be eliminated by a completer who's going to map it all out and put all the rules in and the KPIs and stuff. Because when there's trouble, you need to make decisions and move, and you got to know who's going to make those decisions, and no arguments.
So I don't disagree with you. What I would just say is the nuance of what you're saying is, whilst you may not need the completer until a certain phase of your journey, you actually need to involve the completer right up front. So that they're seeing the whole process play out. If you only bring them in, you know, in a few months' time, once you're ready to execute, the gap from the start till then will be a significant compromise and probably not allow them to fully engage. Whereas if they've been able to almost be a passenger in the process at the beginning, through stages 1, 2, and 3 of all of the brainstorming plan, and they won't merely be a passenger, but they might be participating without having that sort of leadership role. And then you sort of pass the baton to them to lead through the execution phase. That's an important nuance that, you know, I think so many teams think, well, we'll bring those people in when we need them. But you've got to also think, you've got to bring them in when they need to be brought in, which for a completer is from the beginning.
Yeah, it's crucial because some of the mistakes, well, I've made in the past is treating them like the cleanup guy. And they're not the cleanup guy. You know, they setting it up.
Yeah.
And it's crucial they're there, and it's crucial they have authority, because if you don't treat them with respect at the beginning, they just won't buy in. They just won't be there, even to clean up.
Yep. Yeah, I can see, and I saw some completers. I got you, Leonie. I saw some completers sort of nodding, and I'm assuming I'm nodding at what was being said, because I know there's also the chat party that goes on at the same time, which I wasn't looking at. But I know from the just reaction of some of the completers that they all much prefer to be involved from the start. It's all part of understanding the whole picture, not just the picture you want them to understand.
Yeah.
Leonie.
Yeah. Thanks, Doug. I so agree with so much of that. Being attracted to the people that have got the things that I don't have, but at that certain stage. And for me, when you were talking, it's not so much about the completer. I mean, for me, you were talking a lot of my language around the down improvise, around managing the risks of things. But for me, it's actually more about in the implementation, does the team line up with my way of thinking about implementing? So not just necessarily what might be needed, but I guess coming to the verify piece here, I will think, well, there's probably a righter way to implement, and so does the team line up with that? So, for example, if there's a huge amount of energy and it's like, let's do all this, let's make it possible, but then no look at at the obstacles, then I'm going to have problems with that in implementation. If it's too theoretical and not practical enough in the implementation, I'm going to have problems. If collaboration is actually preventing things happening at the end stage, I'm going to have problems.
Yes, absolutely. And in fact, one of the main things to focus on is selling your version of right and spending a lot of time selling that, because if you don't, you're gonna butt heads, and then the strongest head wins.
Yeah. So here's a bit of a question maybe for others then. How do you stop yourself almost falling into this trap of going, well, now when we get to implementation, there's a right way? How do you let go of some of that and still embrace that difference for ways of implementing that you might not have, been thinking about, but also recognizing that, yes, some of that just doesn't work for you.
Hey, Leonie, could you just keep the collaboration going with certain guidelines so that you don't, you guys sound like you're launching a ship and hoping it's going to sail. I'm wondering, should you keep with the ship and sail it together? It seems like the trouble starts when, well, there we go. And I think what worked was collaboration, but you can't collaborate all the time too tightly. It has to be kind of controlled, because otherwise the ship won't go anywhere. But I don't know. I'd look for a way to keep the collaboration going. In that, this just came up with a client the other day, so they were launching rather than dealing with things along the way, and they didn't cross the finish line together. Put it that way.
Yeah.
Leonie, David here. One of the things I learned many years ago, one of my team turned around to me and said, David, if our success is dependent upon your knowledge about computers or any one particular thing, we're going to have a very, very rough road, because there is much smarter people out there than what I am. And I just learned to let go of things. I learned that, your team have to, or the other people that you're collaborating with, have to be given the opportunity to learn their lessons their way. And it doesn't matter what I think or what I say, that you've actually got to give them lessons. And as Greg was just saying, what you do is give them a safe playground. So you allow them enough freedom to learn their lessons without sinking the ship, but learning how to sail the ship a lot better as a team.
Great, thanks. Yeah.
I missed the essence of your question, Leonie. You know, in terms of if what you're saying, that how do you do the execution piece if there's a set way to execute, yet you've got this diversity and you accommodate? Is that what you were getting at? No, something else.
No, it really was about here we go, you know, best performance of a verifier, you know, how to minimize the vulnerabilities of you know, wanting to do it your way or only seeing it, you know, done your way or whatever, but also get it done.
I've got a perspective on that. I'm an 8 in Verify, and I think over the years I've always been in strategy roles, so sort of that upfront stuff, and I can be yeah, that sort of high excellence, and you know, it's got to be great at that point. But I think when we get to the execution, the rollout, I'm playing less of a role. I'm more of a passenger in that space. So I've kind of learned that even though it's probably not exactly what I had in my head, as long as it's still on brief or on strategy, I'm okay with it, sort of letting the odd thing go at that point. And I even had a call this morning where I had to remind myself, it's okay, it's good enough. So I don't know if that gets to what you were referring to or not, but that's how I come across it.
Yeah, thanks.
I think there's a lot of that self-talk that any leader has to do when it comes to diversity. You know, that it's not like there's an ID that just sails through and doesn't have any challenges with working with people that are different to them. I think there's always someone that goes, you know, like I'm just thinking of, you know, if I think of a strong improviser down on all the other drives, they want everything done yesterday, you know, and they'll think, oh, it's so slow having to do this with the team. They love the brainstorming part, but even the execution they think should have been done probably at the same time. But there's a self-talk that goes on as to why, you know, they need to be more patient, or the value of having other people. I think everyone goes through that. The people that are more self-aware and more skilled with diversity probably have more healthy self-talk that goes on to keep reminding yourself of the why, you know, why you need these people around you. It happens in families. You know, your kids can drive you nuts. Disciplining your kids constantly can drive you nuts. But we have the self-talk of, yes, but one day this is going to be easier, or one day this is going to serve them better, or one day this will make it worthwhile. There's always a self-talk to back up the whatever, or to help reduce the frustration that's there. The key is to make it a positive self-talk, you know, rather than one that just adds to the frustration. So I'm curious, here's an example of what I've found with some IDs. Some people have said to me, you know, I've learned that I do need a team, and the team I need needs to look like this. You know, it needs to have I need 4 or 5 people around me doing these sorts of things, whether it's, no matter what it is. If I left my current role, went somewhere else, I'm best, I shine best when I have a team that supports me, that do X things around me. I'm curious if anyone has discovered that for themselves, whether they have that need, and whether it's 2 people, 4 people, 5 people, a large number, lesser number, and what style of people, and whether it might be the other way for some of you, where some of you have said, you know, I've actually learned that I'm best on my own, not when it comes to some of the love side of your life, where you know, you want your family and your significant other in your life, but when it comes to striving for success, even then there might be things we go, I've learned I'm really best on my own, and want to do things that way. I don't know of that. I just am asking if there's people that have experienced that or arrived at that place. But if it is about team, if you prefer team, what sort of people are you attracted to, and how many of them, and what roles do you need them to fill? Jose.
Yes, I always talk, don't I? It's interesting you should say it, because I went through a bit of a self-awareness thing where I was thinking, do I prefer working alone, or do I prefer working with teams? And what kind of people and how many? This was just me looking at how I operate, sort of a self-assessment thing. And what I found is that I much prefer working with teams, because I need someone to talk my ideas through, just so that I understand them. Yeah. But this is going to sound kind of paradoxical or weird, but I need to work with a bunch of people, but I am doing the work. So it's like, yes, I have all these other people that I'm working with, and I need to bring this person along because I need them to do that. And who and how depends on what the objective is, what the problem is that I'm solving, what the project is. So sometimes it's a lot of people, sometimes it's just a few, but I'm very clear that this is what I'm delivering. This is the overall objective, that the problem we're trying to solve. And once I've had my influence on it, that's me doing me. And then I step back and go, now you do you. That's what I need you to do. And I've given you the guidance, off you go, rather than kind of getting, maybe it's the lack of complete. I don't want to get stuck in the one job doing the one thing. So once I've done what I need with these people, so I'm in the team, but I'm also working alone. And I imagine that everyone is working like that, that we're all part of the team, but doing our thing. And that seems to work. But yeah, also, can I just in parentheses say, the change of format between the ups and the downs has been messing with my mind in this what's it called, slide. It's just, I don't know why, but because it doesn't have the same format above and below the line, it's just, I don't know how to read it. Sorry, that's just me.
It was more so we could pull some of this out ourselves. I was more, when I did it, I was more providing some of the answers on the top half so that there was room for everyone else to play on the bottom half and still on the top section as well. You know, what is it the avoids are attracted to, for example, you know, as opposed to just the vulnerability. So I left that there for exactly this conversation. Sorry that it's irritating you as much as it is. I'll need to do that differently in future. So it's interesting that there isn't much conversation around what people have found to be the teams they need to belong to, which says to me maybe there's just a wide diversity of possibilities that do work. And it's not so much about a particular construct. Maybe it's more whatever the models are, it's just whether people are aware enough of themselves and the people around them and those differences to be able to work them effectively together. You know, that's, I know that would be a success ingredient no matter what team model you had, you know. So that might be the simplicity of it.
Yeah, I think Paul, what I'm sitting here thinking about is for me, the team really is about, because I guess I dip in and out of so many businesses and I do so many bits and pieces. I find that it's, for me, the teams that work are the best teams for that particular job or project or whatever it is. And I dip in, do my bit, jump out and just let them get on with it. So, and that's why I think often that would make me a really terrible employee now after being so many years with doing my own thing, where I've got so much freedom and so much autonomy and I make my own decisions. If I had to go back and work for somebody else and do what they were telling me to do, I'd just be a cop case. That would kill me. And so, you know, but it really is about setting up that the team, whatever the team is needed for that particular job. But then, you know, once I've done my bit, I guess, because it's not my business, if I'm working in with my client, it's about, I've really learned so much about over the last few years, just about letting go and recognizing that all I can do is set them up and help support them along the way. But essentially, they're all adults. They need to get on and do their own job, and I move on to the next thing. And I also find that if I've been with a client for any longer than 2 or 3 years doing stuff and working at the coalface, so to speak, I just need to move on. It's like time to move on now, do something more exciting, or come back up to that top level and just get out of the minutiae. So just, it's really interesting. This conversation this morning is just really, really interesting.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Amanda, I want to just invite you into this conversation. You're being unusually quiet today. Maybe you're distracted with little Josh or something, but I want to ask you what it's like for you, this concept of being on a team and what you look for and what works for you and what doesn't work for you. We always learn something from your very different perspective. I just wondered how you would describe your experience.
Hey everyone, thanks Paul. Yeah, I miss joining the webinars more often. It's just Josh's routine changed, so he's usually up at this time, so it makes it a bit more difficult. But yeah, it's funny because I've been thinking all along, I just love working on my own. Like I don't need anyone. Like as long as what I have to do, I can do it, then perfect. As long as I have the time, you could lock me in a room and forget about it. You know, I do need people, I think, you know, like Joel, improvisers, to come up with ideas and give me something to do, because otherwise, you know, I am attracted to people that have ideas and can come up with plans so I can execute them. But when Joe and I started the business, it was just him and I and one other staff. And for me, that was just perfect. That was great. And now we have way too many people, and I find myself, you know, like, oh my God, leave me alone. I just want to get my work done. And I've moved away a bit from managing staff, but so yeah, I'm not sure if that's the avoid improvise or the verify, but yeah, I'm a lone worker, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's right. I think we all fall on a spectrum, on that teaming, you know, from solo to teaming spectrum. Depending on your ID, you fall somewhere on that spectrum. But invariably, we all end up in a team environment of some form at different parts of our life, whether that team is a personal relationship, whether it's a family, whether it's a work environment. We can be in those situations, and we could even want to be in them, you know, for the most part. Doesn't mean there won't be frustration, and it also doesn't mean that you fundamentally aren't wired to be an on your own type of a person, you know. So many of you, like even you just said, Amanda, you can enjoy the brainstorming and the ideas that come from people that are different to you, but then when it comes to execution, which is probably 90% of the time factor, you'd rather do that, or the more you get to do that on your own, the more rewarding that is for you.
Yeah, so it's, you know, if I, obviously I have to balance that out because we do have a team. So I just have to be organized and ensure that I allocate time to collaborate, to be, you know, talking to staff and meetings and all of that, but also block times where I'm on my own with no distractions in just getting things done. And when I can't do both, or when I can't have time on my own, that's when things then don't look really great.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm wondering, as I explained what I just said, I caught myself on it. It didn't feel right. I said, you know, the more rewarding it is to work on your own, but I don't know if it is rewarding to. I think it's that it's just less stressful to work on your own, because I've had so many avoid improvisers tell me that, you know, I grow best when I'm outside my comfort zone, and outside my comfort zone is when I'm working with other people. So doesn't mean it's not stressful and not frustrating, but when they get to the other end, there's seemed to be a lot more fulfillment about the way you got stretched, even if it was somewhat frustrating. But in order to maybe just re-energize, you need that solitude time to go away and be on your own again to regroup. So it's not just necessarily more rewarding, it's just less stressful and less frustrating. And maybe it's what you need to do to cope with the team environment sometimes, is make sure you're getting that solitude time just to regroup and decompress.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's not that it's more rewarding. Like I wouldn't go a full week on my own, for example. I don't need that.
Right.
But if I, actually funny, because like a couple of weeks ago, I booked an end of financial year review with each of our staff, and I booked one, you know, them back to back for all the times I had available during the day whilst Joshua was napping. And I got to the end of the week and I was like, and Joe looked at me and he's like, you don't know yourself yet? Like, how can you book back-to-back meetings and don't allow even half an hour for you to breathe? And I'm like, yeah, well, I just wanted to get them done, you know, because it's July and end of financial year reviews means they're done by July. So And then I get caught in this conflict of what's the right thing to do, and I've got a plan, I've got to do it, and forget to look outside of that. So yeah, it's funny.
It is funny how that's just such a dominant, when you're striving, your mindset as an 8571 is always going to be about getting the task done, you know, and ticking that box so you can complete it, as opposed to what was the journey like? What was the experience like? Did you actually enjoy yourself? And did they enjoy the best of you? You know, that's the more strategic mindset to try, and maybe you could write yourself a little note like that, whatever that wording needs to be for you, that you stick on your computer or something, because if it's not going to come instinctively, you can maybe have something to remind you of that other perspective to also bring into, you know, how you set things up.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Yeah, because we're fast running out of time today. We've only got a couple of minutes left. Does anyone have a question or another contribution that they want to make? Well, we've got a few minutes left.
Paul, David again. I'm just in respect to Amanda's comments about, and I think it's my high improvise. We're always looking at how do we run reviews of people a lot better, a lot stronger in the future. And we decided the best way to run them was to cancel them altogether. We don't do them. What we do is we actually run a program where we consistently, persistently, every day, every week, every month, actually just reward people for the behaviour that we want to see. And I can't imagine going to my partner and saying, look, every 3 months I want to sit down with you and let you know what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong so we can get better. It just doesn't work. Or with your kids, it just doesn't work. And the way to appeal to every idea that's out there is to simply recognise every time they do something which you think is absolutely fantastic, praise it, reward it, acknowledge it, and scrub your regular staff reviews. And please don't try a staff review with your partner or your kids. It just doesn't work.
Yeah, good point. Thanks, David.
Seems like my wife and I have staff reviews every time we're driving.
That's a great example, Greg, of how it doesn't work.
All right, guys. Well, I know we're right near the end, and rather than raise a new topic, maybe this is a good time to close out today's conversation. If as you go through the next week and you're observing yourself in a team context and you notice anything that could build on this conversation, I think it's a really unfinished discussion and one that a lot of people don't have a lot of insight around. Like we talk about self-awareness in terms of our strengths, our weaknesses, our vulnerabilities, our differences with others, but a level of awareness around what do you need to shine in a team environment. We don't have a lot of collateral on that, and we also don't have a lot of commentary from others around it. That's why I say I think it's very unfinished. I think there's a lot that we could develop over time to help people understand what they need in a team environment to shine, you know, whether it's the type of construct or whether it's whatever the dynamics are for them to shine. You know, Judy mentioned before about I thrive under a leader who is all about inclusion. You know, sometimes, or when we heard from Jose and Amanda, it's like, I want to be on the team, and Doug even, for this part, but then I want this part to be on my own. Well, how do you set that up for success? You know, that would be a very interesting self-awareness piece, and then to have that conversation with the people you're working with to set yourself up for success. There's a lot we could develop there. So as you have real life experiences of that, if you think that could be helpful to bring that back to this group, I'd very much welcome that. Even separately, if you want to just, you know, ping me anytime. It's material that would be very valuable. Otherwise, thank you for being here today. It's always fun. We never know what's going to come out as a nuance, but there's always something. And I just appreciate you making time to come along and learn and contribute your experiences to everyone else's betterment as well. So thank you, everybody. Great to see you. Have a great rest of day. And we'll see you in a couple of weeks' time. Take care, everyone.